As a ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Raskin from
Mr. Chairman, thank you. COVID-19 is the deadliest, most disruptive public health crisis we've seen in more than a century. It's already killed 1,129,573 Americans and remains the third leading cause of death behind heart disease and cancer. 5 people in my family have COVID right now, 2 sisters, 2 brothers-in-law, and a 5-year-old nephew. And yet this default on America's debt plan would actually try to claw back money that has already been appropriated for combating COVID-19 and promoting public health. So I've been to some weird hearings in this Congress, Mr. Chairman, but this one might be the weirdest because it's convened in order to accuse a federal agency of the crime of consulting with American citizens. Ms. Weingarten, you are the elected president of 1.7 million members of the American Federation of Teachers. You represent double the number of people any of us do, and definitely a lot more teachers. And I need some enlightenment right now because I'm baffled. As a member of the Select Subcommittee on COVID in the last Congress, I was involved in trying to address this plague when it started. And I remember this specific debate very precisely. So let's talk about process. No leader was more outspoken or more forceful than you were, Ms. Weingarten, in not only demanding, but developing specific strategies to safely reopen America's schools. I remember your school reopening plan developed with health and education experts released in April of 2020. I don't know if that's the one I remember. It's the first one I ever saw. It was in the middle of all the terror and panic when Donald Trump had no plan at all and was still spreading disinformation about COVID-19 disappearing by Easter and encouraging people to try quack medical cures and aggressively defending his friends in the Chinese Communist Party. In July, I remember the effort you led with the NEA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the school superintendents to advocate for safe resumption of in-person school at the start of the 2021-2022 school year. And you gave a specific blueprint to reopen schools in November, and you continued all of this even after the CDC released its operational strategy in February of the next year. And when I went back to Google this to confirm my memory, I found nothing but a bunch of op-eds you wrote demanding school reopenings across the country, countless speeches and articles about your advocacy. Here's one I found in the New York Times about you with the headline, and I'd like to submit it for the record, "The union leader who says she can get teachers back into the schools." I don't know if you remember that one from February 8th, 2021. It's about how you were on the front lines of saying, let's get the kids back into school. So I'd like to submit that for the record, Mr. Chairman. Look, my question for you is, why are you, of all people, being scapegoated today by the Republicans for doing the exact opposite of what you were actually doing during all of that time? How did you get my friends mad?
Look, maybe it's because we tried to do something that nobody else was trying to do. We asked the President of the United States, the then President, I'm sorry, Congressman Raskin, we spent every day from February on trying to get schools open. We knew that remote education was not a substitute for opening schools, but we also knew that people had to be safe. And maybe it's because I live in New York City, I live near a hospital. Every other minute there was an ambulance. There was terror. Our members were terrified, others were terrified. And what we were simply looking for was clear scientific guidance. And when we couldn't get it, we did it ourselves, and we worked with doctors and we worked with others, and we just tried to get it out there.
Okay, now all of your efforts took place without any support from the federal government.
None.
On the contrary, President Trump never produced a school reopening plan, while he did produce the worst record of per capita civilian deaths of any developed country in the world. Education Secretary DeVos never offered any guidance for a safe return to school and continued to undermine public schools in countless ways. So how did the chaos and recklessness in the Trump administration undermine your efforts to advocate for a safe nationwide reopening of the schools?
What essentially happened was that because there was such chaos and such conflicting information, and because at the beginning of the pandemic, so many of, frankly, our activists who were in schools had died, people were fearful. And so what we thought to do was how could we make very tangible, layered mitigation so that people saw ways of reopening schools. I agree with Dr. Wenstrup that when schools had layered mitigation, they were safer than in the communities. But we were looking for that layered mitigation to keep our kids and their teachers and their bus drivers safe. And that was what we were trying to do. We knew that remote education was not a substitute. We knew that kids were not eating the way they needed to. We knew that adolescents were not developing the way they needed to. That's why we needed to do it.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.